Glam Mike. Glam Mike, the theory that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by Michael Afton, is one of those theories that is considered something of a relic of game theory's early coverage of Security Breach. It was when they were trying to piece together the confusing story of the Steel Wool era and seemingly grasping for any kind of answers. In particular, game theory seemed pretty keen to try and fill in gaps in the news story by looking to the Scott Games era. The fact that many of the mysteries in Security Breach just simply couldn't be solved yet until future games came out was not something that game theory was willing to countenance at the time. So the theory of Glam Mike was at one point somewhat popular when game theory's reasoning seemed plausible, but then other games came out, and the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories came out, and it just seemed like Glamrock Freddy's behavior could be better explained by other things, such as how sophisticated the AI of the Glamrocks really is. Roxy's behavior towards Cassie in particular seemed to totally disprove the idea that there's anything supernatural going on with Freddy. Roxy also errors out after realizing that she was about to hurt Cassie, and then later she puts herself in danger to help Cassie. So, mystery solved, right? The Glamrocks just error out and become helpful when they see a kid in trouble that they have a prior relationship with. The book GGY shows that Gregory had a prior relationship with Freddy, so he enters into safe mode when he sees Gregory in danger in Security Breach. It's just AI. No need for possession or any other supernatural thing, right? Well, you want to know what I thought about this? Well, this may shock you, but I agreed. Yep, I agreed with the post-Ruin mainstream consensus that there is no possession, and the earlier game theory videos proposing Glam Mike were just grasping at straws. Then, Secret of the Mimic came out, and once I started really analyzing it, I realized that game theory had always been right. Michael Afton is possessing Glamrock Freddy, and Secret of the Mimic proves it. So first, we have to go over why it ever seemed plausible that Freddy was possessed in the first place. The number one piece of evidence was the Michael Afton room, which I'll just tell you right now is really the crux of this whole video, in the basement of Security Breach. This is evidence that Michael Afton's presence is still somehow felt in the Pizzaplex. But as for Glamrock Freddy himself, his behavior towards Gregory seemed far too protective for just an advanced AI animatronic. Freddy lies by omission to Vanessa when she confronts him with the fact that she is hearing his voice over the Fazwatch. He says that all the Fazwatches sound like him, which is technically true, but dances around the fact that he had indeed been talking to Gregory over the Fazwatch. So Freddy, a robot who is property of Fazbear Entertainment, lies to Fazbear employee Vanessa by intentionally hiding crucial information. But it wasn't just Freddy's behavior, it was also because of what we see in the opening of Security Breach. Game Theory breaks this down in their video Afton's Last Stand, but basically, while in show mode, Freddy receives a command to initialize a task, seemingly to look for Gregory, but doesn't have enough space to allocate towards it, and instead enters safe mode as his system crashes. So, what was it that took up enough space on Freddy's hard drive to prevent the quote-unquote grab task from initializing? Game Theory used this as further evidence that it was Michael Afton's soul, and quite frankly, this was pretty reasonable. And even nowadays, this doesn't have any great explanation under the it's all AI hypothesis. So it's not out of line to use this as evidence of Glam Mike. But all that wouldn't really be enough, especially with how scuffed the development of Security Breach was, and how Ruin seemed to make it pretty clear that the animatronics can act very similar to how Glamrock Freddy acted under the right circumstance without any supernatural interference. So, in order to believe this theory in the big 2026, something would have had to have come along since Ruin to make Glam Mike seem more appealing. And of course, for me anyway, something did come along, and that something was Secret of the Mimic. Towards the end of that game, there is a room that is completely optional to visit and very easy to miss. This room is the Mimic Workshop in Basement 2, aka the White Tiger Basement. And the layout and nature of this room is very similar to the Michael Afton room in Security Breach. I think this is intentional, and I think it shows exactly what's going on with Glamrock Freddy, and I think it's better if I just show you what I mean. First, let's go over the Mimic Workshop room. So this is, of course, the last mandatory thing that you have to be able to do in this game. You have to have gotten every single upgrade by this point, and then this is right before the end game. The Mimic Workshop Room is in the second half, or the second part, I should say, of the Tiger Basement. So you have to have gone through the entire first part, then you have to go through the entire second part, which is what you see me doing here, and get the Star Orphan that's at the end of this section. I'm kind of showing all this just to give you a sense of what it takes. There seems to be some kind of glitch where you can do it nowadays just by having really efficient movement, but definitely when I was doing this not long after the game first came out, you definitely had to get the Star Orphan first, and all the guides at the time said that. So I don't think it's significant that you can nowadays do it if you're quick enough with your movement. The Secret of the Mimic VR update broke a lot of things about the game, and I guess this was just one of them. You can kind of see me going in and out here. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to speed this part up, hopefully. So now we finally come to the Mimic Workshop Room entrance. And you can see what we had to do. We had to double back to get here. And now we have to crouch down because the main door is barred shut. So we have to crouch down and use a source of artificial light to protect ourselves and reveal the entrance. So then we enter in through this small entrance that we have to crouch down through, and we get into the Mimic Workshop Room itself. Now you can see here that the wood makes a grid pattern on the ceiling. Now on the left side of the room, at least from where we came into the entrance, there's a tape recorder here. And this tape recorder has a super important lore piece of information. Namely that this is the first time that Edwin heard Fiona's voice. And this is where the whole Mimic story really starts. We also finally learn what 4625 means. It's a frequency that's associated with ghosts.
Recording. Test.
So right next to the super lore important tape recorder is some stuff that's related to what we just learned in the tape recorder. There's some Endo 01 parts that were apparently used for study material. There's the Mimic Vertuvian Man photo. Here's one of the proto-mimics. That's kind of annoying that we can't take this red sheet off. Here's the blueprint for the Mimic endoskeleton. Here's an Endo 01 that's disassembled for study to the Mimic. Here's another disassembled Endo 01 endoskeleton that's being used for study. And then on the top of the room, leading right into the tape recorder, is an orange proto-remnant line. For some reason, people get a little weird about you calling that orange goop stuff remnant, but it's clearly supposed to be very similar in nature, and it's leading right to the tape recorder where we hear Fiona's voice. So this is telling us how Fiona's presence is in MCM. Her supernatural, essence or memories or soul, whatever you want to call it, is being circulated around through the orange remnants. So this whole room is about how the Mimic came to be, and it's laid out in a very particular way. So now let's compare the way that that's laid out to the way that the Michael Afton room and Security Breach is laid out. Now, in order to get to this point, you have to have backtracked pretty hard. You have to go back to where the first chase sequence in the game occurred, when Monty chases you from out of the smoke. And in order to get back there, you have to go back through basically the entire rest of the game. It's pretty annoying, and you have to have had everything done by this point. You need Monty's claws, and you need Chica's voice box, and you need Roxy's eyes. So you need to have Freddy fully upgraded to access this. There's a note here right before the Michael Afton room. I don't really know what this means. It doesn't actually help in accessing that. So then you have to take out this source of artificial light and use that to expose the opening, and then you don't actually have to crouch down because Gregory's a kid, but an adult would have to crouch down to get into this. And then there's a grid pattern on the ceiling made with the tiles rather than with the wooden struts like it was in the Mimic Workshop room. On the left side of the room is a tape player, and that tape player has a bunch of super important lore to it. And then right next to the tape player is the Phaser Blast poster, which of course is where Vanny's lair is. So we have this room that looks like a recreation of the sister location room that Michael Afton was in sister location. And then we have this tape player that's telling the story of Vanessa, who physically looks like Michael Afton's sister. And then right next to that is Phaser Blast, which at the very least Vanessa looks like his sister, and Blast appears to be where she is at the moment, so that's literally the sister location of this game. And then we have some other interesting things in the room. We have the Roxy Raceway poster, and Roxy Raceway is where the sinkhole is, which is where the heart of the whole mystery of the Pizzaplex really is. There's this industrial fan here, and industrial fans create white noise, which is supposed to help access the 0 point feed. And then of course we have this wall code. Now, this wall code has caused a lot of consternation. No one really knows what to make of it. I think one thing that's pretty interesting, though, that not a lot of people talk about, is that most people assume that this wall code was meant for Gregory, and they're not exactly sure how that fits in with like the modern lore where people assume that he's GGY and that the story GGY from Tales from the Pizzaplex is about the game Gregory, or that some people still think Gregbot, which I don't believe that, but they think that this wall code is for Gregory. However, an interesting thing that no one really talks about in Security Breach is that every time that Gregory has an idea or has a task he's supposed to complete, it's not him that comes up with the idea. It's always Glamrock Freddy. Glamrock Freddy is who tells him to get the Phaser Blaster and the Phascam. He's the one that tells Gregory about Chica's addiction to pizza. He's the one that talks about how to repair the staffbot head that allows you to operate the go-kart. Like, almost everything in the game that Gregory does is because Glamrock Freddy tells him to do so, and we can find echoes of all those things in this wall code. So this wall code seems to have programmed Glamrock Freddy to tell Gregory what to do. Glamrock Freddy is basically the phone guy of this game. He's the one that tells Gregory everything that he needs to know in order to survive the animatronics. But he's held back by his own AI programming, so he can't help a lot of the time, at least not directly. So everything else in this room relates to either Michael Afton himself, or it relates to things that Glamrock Freddy does. Glamrock Freddy finds himself in the sinkhole, and that's where the Roxy Raceway poster is pointing to. Glamrock Freddy tells Gregory that they need to confront Vanny, which is what happens in the Phaser Blast maze. Almost everything that happens in this game is because of something that Glamrock Freddy says, not because of Gregory inherently doing it. And this game is all about role reversals, right? Gregory looks like the bite victim, and instead of getting attacked by an animatronic, he takes safety inside of an animatronic. Likewise, Michael Afton for years survived by advice given to him from the phone guy, and now we have Glamrock Freddy, who is basically acting like the phone guy. So everything in this room can be related to both what Glamrock Freddy does, and also it can be related to Michael Afton and his story. So to recap all this, both the Mimic Workshop room and the Michael Afton room are accessed only after you've gotten every upgrade in the game. You have to use a source of artificial light. You have to crouch down to enter through a small hidden entrance. They have a grid pattern on the ceiling. They both have a tape player on the left side of the room that has a very important lore drop. And they are strewn with objects that are important to the rest of the game. So what do I think this actually all means? What do the similarities between those two rooms really point to? Well, what I think happened is that someone in the Pizzaplex is familiar with how Edwin originally created the Mimic, and they intentionally recreated the circumstances that originally led to the accidental creation and possession of M1. M1 was surrounded by both Edwin's memories of Fiona and some of Fiona's memories transmitted through the proto-remnant circulating throughout MCM. The wireless network maintained by the Mycelium Men preserved some of Fiona, and by tuning into frequency 4625, Edwin was able to interact with some manner of Fiona's essence. Someone then recreated these same conditions to summon not Fiona, but the person most familiar with fighting off violent animatronics, Michael Afton. They recreated his room from Sister Location, the last place that Michael lived in when he was still fully human. They had both white noise and the cartoon that Michael and his siblings used to watch in the background. They got the same exotic butters, which we know Michael did receive because he drew them in the security logbook. They left environmental clues about important locations in the Pizzaplex. They had CDs playing of Vanessa's therapy sessions showing that a woman who looks like his sister, and, may actually be his sister if certain theories are true, had fallen under some kind of dark influence. And finally, they left a code on the wall that, even when decrypted, would not initially make sense except to someone who had already been clued into what was going on. It seems like only Glamrock Freddy's head is possessed, since he maintains his personality after getting decapitated, and meanwhile Freddy's body turns very violent and ruined without his head. So I don't think it was necessary to expose a full Glamrock endo to all these ephemeral forces the same way that the Mimic endo had to be exposed to Fiona's essence down in basement 2 of the Murray's Costume Manor. I think it was probably just an endo head that was exposed to the Michael Afton room for some indeterminate period of time, and then that head was swapped out with one of the endo's head that was digging out the sinkhole for Vanny. This head was primed to accept Michael Afton's lingering spirit by virtue of being surrounded by all these memories related to him, and then down in the sinkhole that spirit was able to actually possess him, and then that head was used as an endo head for the character of Glamrock Freddy. However, the possession didn't take full effect until Freddy saw Gregory, someone that reminded Michael's spirit of his brother. When Freddy was given the command to grab Gregory, Michael's spirit rebelled against the programming and crashed Freddy's system rather than obey Glitch Trap. Then, once Glamrock Freddy woke up, the programming from the wall code started to take effect, and Freddy gives Gregory all the advice he needs to fight against the other Glamrocks. However, you may recall that Roxy also enters safe mode, and there's no indication that she's possessed. So how does that work? In the FNAF universe, and actually Scott Cawthon's other works in general, emotions and memories have a life of their own. They can influence people and objects that have nothing to do with them, and machines in particular are susceptible to influence from stray emotions. So when Cassie had her birthday party, and Roxy was the only one who was at the party with her, Cassie's feelings of love poured into Roxy. And when Roxy was reminded of this by experiencing Cassie's fear, it glitched out her system. And in fact, this is almost the same process as what happened to Glamrock Freddy. It's just that in Roxy's case, it was Cassie's emotions, and in Freddy's case, it was the lingering emotions and memories of Michael Afton. So yeah, Michael Afton is possessing Glamrock Freddy, and it seems likely he's going to be back in the next game. It wouldn't surprise me if the Freddy casing gets irreparably damaged, and they have to put the endo head on a Foxy animatronic instead. And that will complete the possession of that endo, since now Michael will be wearing a Foxy mask again, and that will fully remind him of his past. So this is my defense of Glam Mike. I know it's like 5 years late, but this is my defense of it. What do you think? Am I onto something? Tell me in the comments, like and subscribe, and have a good one.